At the beginning of the story, a special agent named Russell Hatch who was enjoying coffee at a cafe. Not long after, Russell was visited by a one-child widow named Ayumi Esther. Revealed the fact that in the past, Russell and Ayumi had a relationship. It was even very close and almost married. However, because Ayumi's brother did not approve of their relationship, as a result Russell and Ayumi had to separate. Here, Ayumi asks Russell to take care of Ayumi's son, because now she is in serious trouble. Russell tries to ask what Ayumi's problem really is. However, Ayumi didn't want to tell, and instead she asked Russell to promise to always take care of her son if one day Ayumi wasn't around. In the end, Russell accepted Ayumi's request, so Ayumi immediately left there. Russell, who felt curious, secretly followed Ayumi back to her house. Upon arrival, Russell saw a group of masked people who want to enter Ayumi's house. Swiftly, Russell tried to stop them, until there was a shootout. But unfortunately, Russell had to faint as a result of being shot in the shoulder, while the masked group of people immediately entered Ayumi's house and finished her off. 2 years later, Russell was seen who hadn't been able to forget the incident of Ayumi's death. Russell decided to leave the government special agent, because he wanted to focus on finding the perpetrators who had killed Ayumi, his former lover. Then Russell picked up Ayumi's son Jaden, who is now in junior high school. It turns out that until now Russell has kept his promise to Ayumi to take care of Jaden. But it looks like Jaden doesn't like Russell, and only considers Russell as his personal driver. After taking Jaden home, Russell stopped by Jaden's grandfather's shop, or Ayumi's father. Here Russell accidentally saw the grandfather who was arguing with his eldest son, or Ayumi's brother, but he didn't know what the problem was. After Ayumi's brother left, Russell approached the grandfather and immediately invited him to talk. The grandfather was very grateful to Russell, because all this time he had been willing to look after his grandson. Russell replied that all of that was his promise to Ayumi, until whenever Russell will keep Jaden the grandson. Before leaving, the grandfather asked Russell to deliver a box of donations to one of the churches there. An hour later, Russell was seen at a nightclub. Not long after, he was approached by his colleague when he was a special agent. His colleague invited him to rejoin them, but Russell refused because he still wanted to focus on taking revenge on the people who had killed Ayumi and finding out who was behind it. The scene moves to Ayumi's brother named Kaiming. It can be seen that Kaiming is angry because he is still upset with his father for the argument earlier. Kaiming wanted all of grandfather's business to be given to him, but Grandpa refused to do so. In addition, Kaiming also disliked his father who had a good relationship with Russell. It was revealed that Kaiming and Grandpa, his father, were Asian mafia bosses who managed to control several regions in America. But now Grandpa has retired and chooses to spend his old age selling at the store. The next day shows Russell picking up Jaden at school. On the way, Russell asks why Kaiming, his uncle, is always fighting with Grandpa. Jaden replied that he didn't know what the problem was, because Jaden didn't care about either of them. Hearing this, Russell just fell silent and didn't continue his conversation anymore. After Russell dropped Jaden off, Kaiming, the uncle, suddenly came and asked Jaden to get in his car. Then Kaiming took Jaden to a place, then forced him to make illegal stuff transactions. Jaden refused at first because he had never done that before. But Kaiming insisted, saying that there was no one in his family who was as timid as Jaden. Kaiming also provided Jaden with a weapon, then asked him to immediately make the transaction. Reluctantly, Jaden finally obeyed Kaiming's orders. On the other hand, it shows Russell visiting the grandfather's shop. As usual, here the grandfather asks Russell to deliver a box of donations for the church. But at the same time, 2 members of the Russian mafia suddenly arrive, intending to ask Grandpa for rations. The 2 members of the mafia threatened to kill the grandfather if he did not want to give rations to their boss. Russell, who saw all that, of course he could not remain silent. Russell immediately attacked them. Russell easily succeeded in overthrowing one of them, but the other person could escape. Then Russell asked the grandfather to immediately contact the police. Apparently, until now Russell didn't know that the grandfather and Kaiming were mafia bosses too. After that, Russell asked Grandpa not to go anywhere while he would deliver donations to the church. However, when he wanted to enter the car, Russell saw 2 policemen coming. However, Russell was very surprised why the 2 policemen came so fast and acted very suspiciously. As a result, Russell chose to beat the 2 policemen. Russell easily taken the 2 policemen down, but when Russell wanted to leave, suddenly came Kaiming and his troops who immediately attacked Russell. Despite being ganged up on, Russell was still able to fight back, then pointed a gun at Kaiming. In the end, Kaimi asked Russell to calm down and then engaged him in a friendly conversation. Here, Kaimi explained that the two policemen were Kaimi's men who were assigned to guard Grandpa, because since the past 2 years, the grandfather has often been harassed by the Russian mafia group led by a man named Lazarus. Kaimi also explained that the grandfather's business in this city was not only that shop, but there were nightclubs, casinos, and karaoke places. Lazarus, the Russian mafia boss, intends to take all these businesses away from Grandpa. They harassed him almost every week. Even Ayumi's death was also caused by Lazarus in order to seize all of Grandpa's businesses. Hearing this, Russell was furious, and he promised to help his father by slaughtering Lazarus the mafia boss and all his minions. Of course, Russell did this not only because he helped the grandfather, but he wanted to avenge the people who had killed Ayumi, his ex-girlfriend. After that, Russell went to an addict who was his neighbor in the contract. Here, Russell immediately took out the illegal stuff he had previously taken from Lazarus' men. Russell asked the neighbor to deliver it to the person who sold the illegal stuff, because Russell argued that he wanted to buy in large quantities. At first, the neighbor didn't want to take Russell because he was afraid that Russell was just setting him up. But after Russell held him at gunpoint, as a result, the neighbor was frightened and willing to take Russell. Once there, Russell and the neighbor were visited by 3 couriers, one of whom was Jaden, Ayumi's son. At once, Russell shocked why Jaden was here. Then he quickly asked Jaden to get into the car, while the other 2 couriers attacked Russell, and there was a fist fight. In the end, Russell could finish off the 2 couriers and immediately left while taking Jaden from the place. Then Russell took Jaden to his place, then interrogated him about the person who had hired him was. Jaden could only cry in fear, and he didn't dare to say who was the person had hired him. At the same time, Russell was suddenly hit by someone from the side, which instantly made him unconscious. When he woke up, Russell was already in the hospital, while accompanied by a woman who was his cousin. Here Russell asks, how many days has he been unconscious? The cousin replied that Russell had been in a coma for 2 days. Then the cousin told him that Ayumi's father or grandpa contacted Russell every time to inform him that Jaden had disappeared. Hearing this, Russell was very sure that the one who had kidnapped Jaden was Lazarus, the mafia boss, and the person who attacked Russell yesterday must also be Lazarus' henchman. Although his condition has not fully recovered, Russell must to leave the hospital to save Jaden, as well as strike back at Lazarus. In the afternoon, Russell began to stake out the Lazarus headquarters. Russell hid on top of the building while carrying a sniper weapon. The Lazarus residence was heavily guarded, so Russell chose to attack them from a distance. Unfortunately, Lazarus himself wasn't at the headquarters, but there was only Lazarus' right hand. Not long after, the right hand came out in his car. Until this, quickly Russell aimed at the wheels of the car and made the car uncontrollable and then rolled over and crashed. After the right hand was helpless, Russell immediately approached him while asking where Jaden was now. However, the right hand didn't answer and instead said that his men would definitely finish Russell off soon. As a result, Russell became angry. Then he finished off Lazarus' right hand. The scene then moves to Lazarus, the mafia boss. This is the man. It can be seen that he is currently having fun in a nightclub along with some of his men. At the same time, unbeknownst to Lazarus, Russell was already in the nightclub and immediately killed one of Lazarus' men. Not long after, Lazarus decided to leave while being guarded by several of his bodyguards. While on the way, Lazarus just realized that one of his bodyguards was an intruder, that is Russell. Until there was a fist fight in the car. Russell could finish off all of Lazarus' bodyguards, and now there is only Lazarus left. Then the 2 of them had a fight. Until this is the action of Russell, who is not an arbitrary person. Of course, he can also make Lazarus helpless. Before finishing him off, Russell asked where Lazarus had hidden Jaden, the grandpa or Mr. Kim's grandson. Russell also asked why Lazarus had the heart to kill Ayumi, Jaden's mother. Hearing this, Lazarus swore that he had never kidnapped Jaden or killed Ayumi. Lazarus did intend to rule this city, but he never cheated by kidnapping a kid or killing a woman like Ayumi. What Lazarus knew was that Ayumi was killed by Kaiming, his own brother. This was because Kaiming didn't want to have his father's inheritance with Ayumi. Hearing all of Lazarus' explanations, Russell suddenly realized that he was just being used by Kaiming and Grandpa to get rid of Lazarus and his henchmen, who were their rival mafia. But Russell had already slaughtered Lazarus' mafia group, so he was no choice to finish Lazarus too. After that, Russell returned to his place, and he had to fall unconscious due to fatigue. In the morning, Russell was waked up by the neighbor and Russell's cousin. The cousin, who was worried, she tried to ask what really happened. But Russell, who didn't want to make his cousin panic, he lied by saying that he was only involved in a small problem with market thugs. Not long after, Russell decided to go back to look for Jaden by going to camping. The cousin tried to restrain Russell, at least until his condition fully recovered. But Russell insisted, and he left immediately. On the other side, seeing Kaiming and his men celebrating, now that there is no more mafia group to rival them, Jaden was also there because it was true that this was all just a setup for Kaiming to use Russell to finish off Lazarus and his minions. Not long after, Russell arrived while holding Kaiming's lover as hostage. Cheekily, Kaiming even thanked him because he didn't have to bother slaughtering Lazarus, who had been destroyed by Russell. Kaiming also allowed Russell to finish off his lover because Kaiming didn't care. Then Kaiming gave a gun to Jaden, then asked him to kill Russell if Jaden wanted to be considered a Kim family. Until when Jaden pointed his gun, Russell said that Kaiming was the one who had killed Ayumi, Jaden's mother, because Kaiming wanted to control all of his father's inheritance and didn't want to share it with Ayumi. Hearing this, Jaden immediately turned his gun on Kaiming, and Jaden also fired his gun. In the end, Jaden finished off Kaiming, while Russell also could finish off all of Kaiming's men. But Russell had to be shot in the stomach, until he could only laying limp. A few days later, Russell was seen recovering, and he went to the Mr. Kim's shop. Here Russell expresses his disappointment, because he didn't expect at all that the grandfather and Kaiming had the heart to use Russell. But Mr. Kim replies that it's not all even because now Kaiming has been killed. Then the grandfather got angry while pointing a gun, then asked Russell to leave and never see him again. Russell promised that he would go far, but Russell wanted to know first what was in the donations he used to deliver to the church. In the end, the grandfather was honest by saying that the donation contained illegal materials to be made in the church. That's because the church is actually just a cover, and inside is a factory where Grandpa makes illegal stuff. Knowing all this, Russell was grateful. Then he just left the grandfather. When he got into the car, it turned out that there was already Russell's best friend, who was still a special agent. Russell quickly gave the recording device in his pocket because it turned out that his conversation with the grandfather had been recorded by Russell. It will all be used as evidence so that later the grandfather will easily be arrested. Here Russell's friend asked why Russell didn't just kill the grandfather. Russell replied that he preferred the grandfather to be tormented in prison until he met his death. After that, Russell went to his cousin and the neighbor to say thank you very much for helping him. After that, Russell himself will say goodbye to move out of town and start a new life with Jaden, Ayumi's son. Russell already considers Jaden as his own son. Moreover, he once promised Ayumi that he would take care of Jaden for the rest of his life. After that, the movie ended.